that better? So again, thanks to Chris for putting this together and his team. It does take a team, because if it was just Chris, we'd be hot dogs. And so anyway, we appreciate that. It takes a team. Again, got part of my team over here today, and we couldn't do it without the team. We're a disruptive technology, and we've talked about disruptive technologies a lot in these sessions. And I think being disruptive is something that everybody would like to kind of aspire to. We're very disruptive. Well, I can tell you that based on what we've heard today from Simone and Hatem and other speakers, this is not just a game. I mean, this is serious business, and we try to keep a sense of humor, and we try to do all the right things. But pipeline integrity is very serious, and there are serious people that do this job, and we have aspirational goals, and we have technical challenges, but the strategy is that we do the very best we can for the environment, for the people that we protect, and we deploy technology at the right time in the right locations. And the technology deployment is always a challenge. This has been our challenge. I was originally an investor in Smartpipe. Steve Catha, who's here today, was one of the original founders. This has gone through a lot of iterations. We've grown, we've advanced, and we continue to grow and advance every day. So I'll take some exception. We work hard on our patents, and I'm not giving them away. So just saying, Baker Hughes can be generous. We have to make a living with ours. So we have some great technology, and what you see here is this is a 14-inch Smartpipe. So this is not our largest, but one of the largest systems that we make, and there are multiple fiber optic cables on board, so that the Smartpipe is not just a term. This is a very smart pipe, and with the latest innovations, it is getting smarter all the time. So this is something that we worked hard on for years. We're now preparing for commercial deployment on a larger scale. And one of the drivers that is significant to all of us is the change that we see in our way of life in America, the way that we perceive things. Politically charged and polarized. But what I think we're focused on is something that we've been focused on in our value proposition since the beginning, is to create something special to protect the environment, protect public safety, and to do it in ways that plug the technology gaps that we're all aware of as we've developed composite pipe systems, and how we can make that better every day. And so that's my team, and my team here today, at least the ones that are still here. We work hard. We've stayed as a team. We don't lose people. This is as much a mission as your mission, Waylon. I mean, this is more than a job for us. And one of the drivers that we see that now has a name is ESG. I won't tell on Chris, and I won't tell when this happened, but I was telling Chris, he says, well, the ESG aspects of this, and for the first time since I've known Chris, I got that deer in the headlights look. He had no idea what I was talking about. I lied. I told you I wasn't going to tell that story. But what we both laughed about is I only learned what it was about 90 days earlier. So this is something that sustainability reports are issued every year by the majors. I mean, I know Enbridge is here, and their sustainability report, I'll guess, is 100+ pages. Sustainability report really just lays out how we're going to be good stewards, how we're going to protect the environment and the people that we serve. And 100 pages is probably light for a lot of these companies. And I know Baker Hughes probably has at least more than 100 pages. So what we found is that with ESG, we found that our value proposition had a name, and that name was ESG. ESG came, and Morgan Stanley really kind of, I don't know that they coined it, but they are kind of an authority on ESG. ESG investing is how this came about. So ESG investing is, and this is their definition, is the consideration of environmental, social, and governance factors alongside financial factors in the investment making process. What that means is that especially millennials, younger investors, as they come in, they want to invest in something that makes them feel good, that they are they're passionate about, and they want to invest in companies that kind of track their values. What we're finding is that for a lot of reasons, the fossil fuel industry has essentially been tobacconized. And what that means is that, you know, how many people decided they wouldn't invest in RJ Reynolds and other tobacco companies because of that. I'm already 10 to 10. I just got started. Chris only gave me 15 minutes, so I'm, yeah. So that is a challenge for the industry, and the industry's never been great about presenting our best side, our policies that make life better for everyone. If it wasn't for energy and energy delivery systems, we'd still be in the dark with rock tools. And for individual companies, not investors, ESG management framework really tracks that, and identifying and measuring the impact of your organization's policies and your procedures for environmental and social benefit. That's a real thing. And it's not just a real thing to make you feel better. The real thing is that there's now a scorecard on this. And if you don't score very high, guess what? You're limited in your access to capital. You pay the price for cost of capital, and it may not be available to you at all. And a lot of organizations won't do business with someone with a low ESG score because you're careless, you can't be trusted, you don't, I mean, it's a long list. So we add an E. So ESG plus E for us, we deliver value that is going to increase revenues. It's going to increase your bottom line. It's going to lower the cost of that installation of Smartpipe because it's going to be in locations that are difficult to access. They are going to be very sensitive. They're going to be, you know, ultimately high consequence areas. And these areas are extremely expensive to access, to replace infrastructure if you could get to it. A lot of pipelines you simply can't access, and makes your job so much harder from an integrity side because you can't get to them. I mean, you got a lot of ideas, do a lot of inspection, do a lot of assessment, but then it's what I call the now what. So then you hit the now what, and the now what is, well, now what do we do? And that's the question, and a lot of times there's no answer. So we've tried to provide that answer. So environmental, social includes social justice impacts. This is not something that was ever considered before. Environmental justice, which is a term that is now being focused on. These are things that we have to deal with, and we have to be sensitive to them. And then governance, you got to walk the talk. I mean, whatever you put in your sustainability, your ESG report, you better be doing it in reality, or that score that you jacked up because of you have a great speech writer, which I don't, by the way. If you're not walking the talk, your score gets knocked down to a point where you pay immediately. Economic opportunity and alignment. Advanced technologies create these opportunities, and we're happy to be one of those advanced technologies. We work hard on it, we demonstrate it, we prove it, and it's now getting ready to pay off. And when we talk about duration of that ramp up, and that was a great hockey stick that Simone showed, but that is essentially that it works. We're in the, what is that, Valley of Despair? You know, we've built condos in the Valley of Despair. We've been doing this so long. But we are now coming out of the Valley of Despair, and one of the drivers is ESG and its importance in society and in business. This is Enbridge's, Williams, Enterprise. These are their ESG reports, and they're all in excess of 100 pages. So how do we meet our ESG objectives and help you meet your ESG plus E objectives? Because we deliver a big economic E. We're high pressure, large diameter, and long continuous links. We have a very unique on-site production facility. So we make Smartpipe that we minimize the environmental and social impact, and this allows you to make an integrity investment in very difficult locations. So US DOE, we talk about hydrogen. US DOE requested samples of Smartpipe back in 2015, did their independent testing. That is now part of the B3112 hydrogen standard. And we're in there as an exhibit. So we are qualified for H2, CO2, and that's a big deal. So our bona fides are established. Environmental, you know, we've heard from Hoidal. We used it, amazing, same 70% reduction in our carbon footprint. But that's a function of a composite pipe versus a steel pipe, and the way that we go about it and the way we install. We're targeting zero methane by the end of this coming year, based on the innovations that we're developing now. Again, it's trenchless, so we reduce the environmental impact. Again, US DOE qualified CO2 sequestration. There are folks in the room where we're working on all these with your companies. So, and we appreciate that very much. The social license. Littlestar is kind of a dead giveaway. I'm a member of the Osage tribe, so I'm an Osage elder. Enbridge did a great job years ago of coming, when they came through the Osage Nation. They took extra care, and it was the first time I'd really focused on Enbridge, but they came through our, the Osage Nation, and did such a great job. They earned their social license early. They were engaged. They came in, they listened to, for the Canadian group, this is something they struggle with First Nations in Canada. Everyone does. I mean, we're sovereign nations, and all of a sudden we've got a pipeline company coming through. Be on your, just be nice. And they were, that helped. They did all the right things, I can say that. Proactive and predictive safety, I mean, based on our multiple fiber optic cables on board, we can tell you if someone's walking near your pipeline, much less excavating near it. And that is embedded, those are embedded fiber optics. And if you understand fiber optics, being embedded into the structure of the pipe is nothing like being installed near the pipe. Embedded as part of our structure increases sensitivity exponentially. This gives you a whole new set of tools in the box. Added economics and social benefits. Once we're in the right of way, you're essentially monitoring the right of way, not just that pipe. One of our installation in Illinois, it was inside of a heavy wall steel pipe. Smartpipe went inside with fiber optics, 15 feet of cover, another 15 feet of water, and we could watch barge traffic and speedboats. And that was from inside the heavy wall steel pipe. This is not our technology. This is current fiber optic technology, and our IP includes I just did that to gig him. But our IP includes that embedded fiber. So we look to best in class, whether it's Steve Coles with Hi-Fi and Photech and OptiSense, OmniSense. We'll be in Washington next week at the Fiber Optic Sensing Association, so which we're members, and we have leadership roles. I say we, the royal we, Robin McIntosh. And these are things that we continually work on, and that is public safety and environmental security writ large. The governance, walk the walk, walk the talk. This increases the number of accessible integrity projects, what we do. Technology plus increased data, and we are all about data collection. And that data is an entirely new aspect of our business, is data collection and what we do with that data. And then greater transparency, real-time data from our system as an operator sitting next to a regulator. You can provide real-time looks into the operation of a pipeline on a moment's notice. So these are things that are possible for all stakeholders. And that's an important aspect of the OSG model. So finally, economics. We can show you how to make a lot more money out of the pipeline that you have and take an out of service pipeline, bring it back into a revenue producing asset. This is something, again, that tool wasn't in the box. Now it is. Just a final slide on kind of the overlap of environmental, social, and governance aspects of it. And end of slideshow. That's a custom slide there. So any questions? I'm way over time. Kara's been kind. He only gave me 15 minutes, and I took more than that. My team, I think you may have lost a bet. No way. Was it?
Little over. It's okay though.
Okay.
I stopped timing. You can keep talking, Gary.
There's money on the table on that. Any questions? Anything I can answer for you about Smartpipe? My topic, so ESG, ESGE. All right. Thanks, everybody.
I didn't get your picture. Because we want to keep Kara happy. She would have given me like 35 minutes. Yeah, I heard her say that.
All right. I don't know what
Yeah, awesome job. Also, thank you for sponsoring. That's our pleasure. I appreciate it.
It's good.
I guess it's at Gary's.
We ran away, so we never got a plaque. You want to give one of
Here,
them?
let's do it right now. While he's getting to you.
Credit.
We just got one for you. We didn't know you were speaking.
He really did know that.
That's right. We go ahead. He's muted. I'm on now. Yeah. No introduction, Chris. All right. Feel free to take a seat wherever you like, Chris. Anywhere you want.
I'll sit next to this guy.
Yeah. Andy, thanks for showing us. Appreciate you. Yes, sir. Welcome. Have fun. Anywhere you want. Get comfortable. Tony, thank you for making it, sir. It's a pleasure. If I sit, I'll actually be a little bit taller because the chairs are there. So, but it is what it is. We can't pick our talents. All right, so we'll get started. The objective with the next hour is these guys really don't need introductions. We're very blessed to have the caliber individuals we have here in this panel discussion to talk about the theme of pipeline regulations and really regulations as a whole, but in this case, this forum being pipeline regulations, and how that can either restrict or promote innovation and technology, the use of it, time to buy-in and all that. So that's the overall theme for this panel discussion. And we worked hard to build a panel that we thought would be able to speak pretty comprehensively. So what I'll try to do is just create a little bit of a backdrop, leveraging my experience in pipeline integrity and some of the newer regulations. But the overarching umbrella is this core philosophy of how regulation can be a driver or impede innovation technology and a market's potential use of promoting or using those said technologies. So in no specific order, again, I will do a brief introduction. So we have Chris Hoidal. Chris is currently the Senior Technical Advisor at U.S. Department of Transportation, PHMSA. We had a chance to hear him earlier. Before these last almost 5 years as a Senior Technical Advisor, he was the Region Director on the West for about 23 years. So lots of experience there navigating and implementing regulation. He comes with a Bachelor's of Science in Geological Engineering. So again, thanks, Chris, for sharing some of your time with us today. We also have Andy Drake. He's Vice President of Asset Integrity, and he's responsible for Enbridge's risk assessment and integrity programs to ensure safe transportation of their gas transmission assets in North America. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Industrial and Systems Engineering from The Ohio State University, and is a registered professional engineer in Texas. He was also appointed by the Secretary of the U.S. Department to serve on the GPAC, the Gas Pipeline Advisory Committee, to evaluate and advise PHMSA on potential safety rulemaking in the U.S., and he's also recently been named an ASME Fellow. So thank you, sir, for making time for us today. We also have Mr. Tony Rizk. He's a Vice President of Technical Services at Boardwalk Pipelines. Pipeline Partners. He holds a bachelor's in civil engineering and a master's in structural engineering. He's a registered professional engineer in 11 states, including Texas. He has 32 years experience in pipeline integrity for both natural gas and liquids. He's held several executive positions with engineering firms until 2010. And again, as we said, presently, he's Vice President of Technical Services at Boardwalk, leading asset integrity, asset reliability, storage, and supply chain. So thank you, sir. And then also, last but not least, you don't have a quorum unless you have a party of 4 or more. So our fourth Chris of the day. Thanks for making time for us. We were going to have Bryce here, but, there's a height requirement, so we couldn't have all the tall guys up there. So we appreciate you joining us. Had to level this out a little bit. It's the Chris factor. So Chris Yoxall is Executive Vice President at the ROSEN Group, and he's presently based in Houston, Texas. He has over 25 years in asset integrity management, including legal, technical, contractual agreements, primarily oil and gas. Over this period, he's been involved in Africa, Australia, Asia, China, and North America. He's pretty involved in the global business at ROSEN. He studied both mechanical and metallurgical engineering and is recognized with the Bachelor's of Science in Engineering Management. He also serves the industry as an executive of the Australian Pipeline and Gas Association Research and Standards Committee, as well as being on the board of directors of the Energy Pipelines CRC and YPP US, respectively. So that's our panel today. I'm going to try to lead us through about 3 series of topics that are all tied to this concept of regulation and innovation in technology. If we have enough time, ideally we'd like to engage the audience. So as we touch on several topics, please prime your questions. ADV Marketing's done a good job of giving us pens and notepads, so feel free to use them. All right, so here we go. First topic. Prior to RIN 1, as Mr. Hoidal shared with us of the new gas rule, special permits were mostly used to go outside of what most would consider a more prescriptive nature of U.S. pipeline regulation, namely parts 192 and 195. Now, through various parts of the new gas rule, or RIN 1, we have options through 192.18, where we can submit alternate approaches to PHMSA for a no objection. An example of that is the material properties verification process, where an alternate sampling that's different from that prescribed by PHMSA can be submitted for a no objection. And we think this is pretty relevant, right? So around 2010 was when we started noticing this new regulation coming about various properties. That's when this whole concept of TVC or VTC records came to fruition. And we saw companies responding to that. A great example of that is what we heard with MMT in their HSD system. So we have technologies today that can approach regulation, whether it be Smartpipe. I know now we've had that in Class C type gathering lines, you can explicitly use composites. But with this whole idea of prescriptive nature, more restrictive, and now the new gas rule being a little bit more what appears to be open, my first question is to Mr. Chris Hoidal around why the change to enable a no objection versus the special permit route? And I will hand you a mic.
Why the change? Why the change? Well, Congress told us to do it, but the biggest reason is the old process was too ponderous. I mean, just going through the process of technologies that were, maybe proven for subsea or proven for the production fields. Why would we turn a blind eye to those technologies? So we wanted to leave it. We wanted to leave an opening so we didn't have to go the special permit route, because with special permits, you have to show a quid pro quo for everything. They're not going to do this, but they have to do this. They're not going to, and then you have to publish to the Federal Register, get public input. These things sometimes take years, and we need to be more nimble than that. So I guess the short answer is better timing. Get those technologies in the market quicker.
So it's absolutely philosophy change then, right? It's a way to use regulation to fast track or open up the door to having newer technologies and innovation come to light.
The good part about these new regulations, because they weren't covered before, it's fresh ground. You could if you look at it, this notification process is only for certain parts of the code, so it's fresh ground. So it's not like you have to look at, it's not like a deviation from existing code, because it's a brand new aspect of the regulations. So.
Thank you for that. So if I may, I'll ask Mr. Drake, how do you see, Andy, how do you see this ability to submit a no objection, as we just heard, for specific parts of code? How does that help us as an industry, whether it's operators, service providers, consultants, et cetera?
Well, when the advisory committee was deliberating on the rule, we could see that the rule, it's not called the mega rule, curiously. It's a big rule, and it's very onerous. And you're really trying to make a significant step change in the confidence and certainty around pipes and what they're made out of. And we could see that was going to be a significant burden to the industry. We needed to try to create some optionality in how you would resolve that uncertainty. And we could see emerging technologies that were right close, and I think, there's inline inspection tools in lieu of hydrostatic testing. That creates a lot of value back to ESG. We lower the amount of gas released into the atmosphere. We don't put water in the pipe. We don't interrupt service nearly as much. Those are all win-win-wins, as long as we can ensure the safety. So there's a lot of validation work that has to be done, but we think that's a near state technology. And frankly, Smartpipe also right on the edge. As a matter of fact, we have a special permit that we've chosen to file with PHMSA on Smartpipe in one of these sites where we have TVC record challenges on a pipe service to a small town in Virginia. We think it's a great opportunity to test this out, this technology. We use no objection approach, but frankly, we want to be a little bit more transparent because we think this is a long-term road we're trying to build here with this technology. And so we want to try to actually bring down some of the other commissioners from other states to see this as a viable solution to not only the TVC records challenge, but also maybe even some of the things with regard to transport blended hydrogen, because we have these with some of these laterals, they're older, they may not cross the hurdle rate of a 5 or 10% blended hydrogen service for hydrogen-induced cracking. So we can take that risk off the table, but we've got to help people kind of get familiar with that. So this creates a platform for that. And I think the no objection option is really important to help encourage and expedite the consideration and application of technologies to solve some of these problems. Specifically, it's tied to TVC and those, but I think that door is a good door for us to explore on other things as well.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. So either Chris or Tony, a question to either of you, whoever wants to jump in first. So just highlighting more the concept of promoting technology and innovation. How do you think this changed to where now we have this option to not have to go so rigid through a special permit to say, you know what, we can submit an objection? How do you specifically think that enables, from your experience, technology and innovation?
Obviously, it lowers barriers. I mean, that's the main reason. Timing, I mentioned that earlier. I think the biggest issue we have is it allows us to try out technologies and a relatively, we'll pick Smartpipe. You're putting a pipe inside of a pipe. So you're actually testing this technology, but if for some reason something went wrong, it's inside of another pipe. But also it's fodder for future, hydrogen. That's a big issue. You can see migration across this. You'll be able to monitor real-time migration across the surface. Same thing goes with, ILI tools that can measure SMICE. Why are we digging up the whole countryside? We're doing damage to the environment. Here we can actually use ILI tools to establish population groups. So, I mean, we'd be foolish not to take advantage of these technologies. They've been around, some of them have been around for, heck, I remember talking about some of these technologies 10, 15 years ago, and we still haven't worked them into the regs. This is a way to get them into the regulations more quickly than special permits. More quickly, I mean, I think they just put in, Clock Spring just got into the regulations in the last couple of years, and it's been around since the 90s. We can't wait that long.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. Tony, anything you want to add there about how it promotes innovation and technology?
Well, I find it easy to work with PHMSA if we go to them and tell them we have an idea, like a SMICE tool, a ROMAT tool. We've ran one. We went to PHMSA. We filed in 19218. Within 2 weeks, we got a letter back, approval. We told them we'll share with them the information when we get it. We'll tell them what the populations are, and when we dig to validate, we'll share that information with them. There is no reason to dig up the countryside. There's no reason to release methane to atmosphere. There's no reason to irritate, power plants, especially here in Texas in the winter. I heard about all that crap last winter. So they were very open, and we're using technology to our advantage. We're not skimping on safety. On the contrary, we want to use the tools available to us to increase the safety of the pipelines. That's the whole crux of it. This is not something that we're trying to do on the cheap. It's actually costing us more money. We just want to do it right. And we have filed many requests with PHMSA for MMT and ROMAT, and we found them to be easy to work with, and we'll share that information with them. And if Andy's nice to me today, I may even send him that information.
And you also have to understand, yeah, thank you. But you have to understand, let's take these ILIs, they can get SMICE. When they started, the genesis of the regulation, they didn't exist really in 2011,
Yeah.
So but we weren't going to go back and restart the regulations from scratch. It was painful enough, 10 years to get this thing out the door. So that's one reason I'm glad you guys put those notifications in there, because it kind of creates a little conduit to bring in new technology.
So I'll use that as a segue to maybe our second topic, and I had you listed for this, and so you can keep the mic. So I think what we're moving towards is technology is an enabler, or it can be an enabler, right? And but it needs to be nurtured is kind of one of the ways I want to say it, to gain the appropriate momentum, confidence, and trust, right? You need to be able to build up that confidence in technology. And but it can also be flexible, right? It can enable you to say, well, this will help us when unforeseen things happen. Technology is important to us, right? So as an industry, right, we need money to develop technology. And we see it being funded and improved through various channels, right? Just to name a few, I know that the R&D, if I'm not mistaken, Summit is going on right now so that PHMSA and DOT can identify where we need dollars to support research and development, right? So PHMSA R&D. There's other organizations that have come together globally. One example is PRCI. JIPs are gaining momentum, right? Where we can tackle certain topics, you know, that have particular interest. Direct projects and even private funding, right? So when we really believe in something as an entrepreneur, you go and you find the funding to keep it alive. Simone talked about that today as an example. You know, keep into this RIN 1 of the new regulation. You know, an example of this, I believe, that we could use as a segue to this conversation about technology is the whole concept of MAOP reconfirmation, right? So as it relates to MAOP reconfirmation, traditionally an operator would establish an MAOP either through grandfather or hydro testing. And hydro testing has its pros and cons. But when you can use a technology, I think there are advantages, right? Like we talked about, things that maybe we didn't foresee in 2010, that ESG being a bigger issue, things like methane emissions, et cetera. So PHMSA did enable the option for an ECA, an engineering critical assessment, right? That leverages ILI technology. And this ECA, where I hone in on technology now, is it leverages both what some would call traditional technologies like MFL and caliper that are well understood, but it also namely already says that you can use technologies like EMAT or hard spot technologies, which are more complex and maybe a little less used over the years as we look at an industry. And so what that makes us think is that this platform of ILI, while it still has some improvements that are needed, we have confidence in it. Right, so that's what I want to hone in on, right? Is that as a regulator, can you share some thoughts as to what's happened since the early 2000s as a regulator that we've gained confidence, whether as an industry or as a regulator, in this platform of ILI for managing threats that may happen and leveraging that relationship between either a regulator, an operator, and technology providers to close some of these gaps, right? So again, the question around,
That's
you
a
know,
long question.
yeah, what's happened that gave you confidence as a regulator in a platform like ILI, with the idea being, you know, you have new technologies, innovation happening. How can we relate that from ILI to what maybe new technologies are trying to do?
Well, I think the ILI industry stepped up. I mean, initially it was deformation tools and corrosion loss tools, either UT or MFL. And there was a huge gains made from that. I mean, the number of releases we have from, you know, gouges and large-scale general corrosion, they have dropped precipitously. But now, all of a sudden, the cause of our risks have changed. I mean, cause of our accidents have changed. It's landslides, it's river washouts, it's cracking. And what's changed? I mean, EMAT tools back, at least to me, were relatively experimental in 2000. Then you have the IMU tools, which can help you out with landslides. You now have the ability to start addressing those other risks. And you know, we were talking about hard spots earlier. You know, but I didn't really have problems. I guess hard spots are associated with primarily certain types of pipe manufacturers. But you know, that technology is there. You know, just.
So you say the ILI vendors stepped up?
I think the ILI vendors stepped up. Yeah, and I guess. I was kind of, and Andy, I'm going to speak for you. I mean, you know, when this was all coming in, like the late 90s, we were all worried about making a lot of false positives and the credibility of, you know, whether or not that we're going to be digging up the whole countryside. But it turned out that, you know, as we got better at assessing the, you know, or evaluating or analyzing the data, we saw fewer and fewer, further false positives, or false positives. So yeah, the confidence went up with the existing tools, and the ILI vendors, they delivered.
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Yoxall here. From your perspective as a products company, as a service provider, as a technology development company, Thinking about the audience here, there are different technologies in the room. Operators are constantly offered or asking questions about how different products and services can help them keep their pipe round, sound, and in the ground. What do you think we can learn from this as it relates to adopting and promoting technology and innovation?
Chris, I was, with your question, thinking about Chris's answer as well. If I try and bring it back to sort of just decades of periods, if we look back, we were in the period of collecting data as an industry, regardless of the source of the data. Today, we probably sit in the world of information, and for sure, as we move forward, it really is going to be about making decisions. And the one thing that's certainly common in what I hear is this element of time. I think technology is never going to be the limit. It's a question of having the right technology at the right time, and being able to bring it forth with the right reason. And when I look at maybe what has changed, for sure there's been some incremental improvements and some step changes in other areas of technology, but I actually think the way that we as an industry have collaborated over the last 10, 20 years in particular has really been changing. Because you've had in the past, drivers or goals were primarily around performance, operational performance. Today we probably talk more around technology and needing to have more technology to find more data to make more decisions. And I think the future really is going to be around decision making. And whilst everything around us has changed, the one thing that doesn't change is time. So we've got to be able to make decisions far quicker than we've been able to make them in the past. And the only way you're going to achieve that is by collaborating. And I think if you are able to identify what are the needs, what are the wants of 10 years from today, but do something about it today, we may find ourselves in 10 years from now not having this deja vu discussion.
Sure.
So I don't know if that quite answers the question per se, but I think that picking what Chris has said, I do feel that as an industry, our biggest challenge is time. And the only way to overcome that is work much closer. And I think that for me has been the game changer. Regulators, operators, asset owners, service providers are working much closer than they've ever done before. And I think we're realizing the benefit of it.
I'll ask either Andy or Tony. You guys are operators, right? And often we need money to stay alive, right? As service providers, consultants, technology developers. And you guys are buying, right? I want to stay on this concept of, I'll give you an example actually. I remember once I was at a PRCI meeting and Daniel Castro, if y'all know him, he and I were talking and someone walks up and a different person says, oh yeah, you work for ROSEN. At the time I was working for ROSEN. And they said, I know exactly who you are. And I was like, okay, not saying that this was at Williams, it was a different company. And I said, oh really, how do you know me? She said, oh, I don't know you, I know ROSEN. And I was like, why is that? They said, you're our third largest expense as an ILI program. Right? And so it wasn't that ROSEN was the expense, it was this concept of the pigging program as a mechanism to maintain the integrity of the pipe and gather data was all the way up to the CFO and the CEO of the company. Right? And so what I want to try to get to maybe from Tony or Andy is, ILI has kind of, as a technology, had to defend its value and it's had a lot of consequence. So let's project that on maybe some of the other technologies that we look at, whether it's not namely Smartpipe, or I know we're looking at some new compression sleeve technologies. Technology as a whole, is there anything that you can share or speak to as it relates to, what have we learned about how technology is an enabler and how we can expand that to make that path of useful technologies faster, right? So we can get the benefit from that.
Oh, I'm going to follow up on Chris's comment about timing. It's not serendipitous or coincidental that timing aligns. We work really, really hard and really deliberately to make that timing work out. We've had some issues with hard spots where previous tools didn't have the confidence we needed. We came together as a group, went out to ADD, tested hard spots, found out which tools had which levels of confidence and abilities, and then started deploying them and working collectively to kind of iterate and develop that technology. I'm going to pick up on IMUs for a second because I think your point about landslide is really illustrative of this dominoing effect of technology and opportunities and complexity that we're facing. we got the IMD tools working better. We now can start tracking movements in the pipe. We get a sense of when the pipes are being displaced more granularly, start making more effective and proactive efforts to get out and mitigate movement of pipe before the earth wells TSC, potential stream carrying capacity, is exceeded. Okay, that's all great. So we get out there and we start finding, well, these are wells that were made in 1950s. They weren't X-ray. You got to worry about what is the quality of that earth well. So we make assumptions about TSC. And all of a sudden we're starting to cut out a lot of earth wells. Oof, that creates a whole new challenge when you especially start looking about your ESG again. So every time I go to cut one of those out, I got to flow it on 15 miles, 30 inch pipe. Oof, that doesn't look good on your ESG report. And it's tough on service. So we came up with another technology, started looking at how can we extend technologies from like clock spring that can carry lateral loads and take some of that tensile absorption in that displacement. Working with PHMSA to try to get that incorporated so that we can employ that new technology and avoid cutting out those girth wells, mitigate interruption of service, and solve this problem that we now are aware of because of the technology we created 10 years ago. And it's just that dominoing, that constant, it's evolution, just constant, working together so it moves from the ILI vendors to the clock spring folks over here to AD. You're kind of going back and forth, around and around, iteratively, just in a virtuous cycle to keep developing. And I think that the thing that, now that I'm older in my career, is the complexity, we need to embrace it. It's not going to go the other way. It's going to get and. We want to be safe. We want to be economically friendly. We want to be environmentally friendly. We want to mitigate methane reduction. Okay, just more ands. Frankly, I think that's an opportunity for us. I think that's a great thing for us to embrace. We don't need to try to convince society why they're wrong. That is not something we should be doing. If you want to be in, if we're worried about greenhouse gas emissions, fine, got it. It's an and. We're going to figure out how to do that and be safe and be cost efficient and get the fuel you need to stay warm at a reasonable cost. And. That is our strength and our wheelhouse. We do not need to fight with the environmentalists in society about this issue. We need to embrace it.
That's a great answer. Tony, anything you want to add to either one of those?
Well, obviously, we use a lot of ILI tools. It is the best technology we have right now to inspect our pipelines. My CEO thinks I'm the pipe whisperer. I can somehow walk over the pipeline and with my feet figure out what's going on. But, if I have a wish, I would say two things. Right now, we use different tools to address different threats. We use MFL, CMFL, EMAT, low field for hard spots. It would be nice to have a tool that can pick up all these things. Spiral tools were in existence that can do MFL, CMFL. We ran through Houston an MFL, CMFL, an EMAT, and a hotspot tool, and it ticked off every commercial guy I have. So it would be nice that we can combine all these technologies. I understand ILI algorithms are getting a lot better. We dig a lot less false positive, I want to call them. We do a lot of unity plots, and we're getting a lot better at digging where we need to dig. But I think there's plenty of opportunity to improve those algorithms with finite element analysis. We need to embrace that. We need to get there. FEA, we build spaceships, skyscrapers with FEA modeling, but we're still using R-string to do our corrosion calculations. There's plenty of improvements that we can have. Hopefully in the next 4 or 5 years, we will get there. That's a wish list. It used to be ESRI. I wish they have a GIS system 10 years ago, but we already got that. So
You can keep the mic because I love the segue. I love it. So the third topic is that whole concept of allocation of resources, right? So all resources are finite, right? Basic economics. So where do we put them? And to effectively manage the risk and appropriately allocate those resources, it's really important for us to have ever-growing and evolving tools in our tool belt, right? So for all the Andy, help us. For all those ands, we need to continue to grow our utility belt, right? And so you know, that brings into question a lot of things, right? Whether it's analytic techniques, i.e., you know, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Well, that requires data to be held the proper way, and that's one avenue. Another one would be, we recently saw that, at least me, we know that at PRCI, you know, a new way to calculate burst pressure calculations through P squared, I think it was. You know, we're seeing us challenging as an industry different ways that we challenge the norm, right? So why R-string? Why not something different? But also whether it be the tools then, right? Do we need more tools or
New analytics techniques, we have all these things, and we're honing in on ILI a little bit. Maybe we need to expand where it is, but you know, ILI's done a good job, I think, over the last 20 years of paving the way of how technology can be enabled, right? Where else are we seeing this similar trajectory of success in a technology platform, right? Is it composite repairs? Is it data integration? What are your thoughts as an operator as to what other track of technology is having the right momentum behind it?
I mean, I can talk for an hour about this, but you know, several years ago, we basically pioneered the use of RAPs and RAP testing for seam anomalies, and we petitioned PHMSA. PHMSA was like, yeah, I don't know. So we went to Mr. Chris Alexander, and we, you know, I'm a structural engineer. We love to blow up stuff on purpose, and Chris, for some reason, when you say blow up stuff, he has a big smile on his face. Look, so you know, we started burst testing RAPs for girth weld anomalies, seam anomalies. We use wet layups for a hell of a lot of repairs. You know, that's good for the environment. I don't have to blow a section down. That's good for us. So, you know, technology is supposed to help us, but I believe in data. I believe in science. And when we went and presented all that data to our regulators and they saw it and they say, oh my God, this stuff is good. So, you know, we have some work to do on analytics. MMT has come to our, you know, they saved us on a couple of projects already, 5 projects that we did not have good records on the grade of the pipe. We're using ROMAT tools. We didn't have those tools in the toolbox just 5-6 years ago. We need to be innovative. Our industry really is lagging behind on innovation. I mean, think about it. What have we innovated in the last 20 years? And then think about 20 years ago, you know, my son, I have a 19-year-old son. He was asking me yesterday, Dad, how many apps did you have in the App Store when you were young? So I didn't want to tell him I didn't even have a cell phone because he would think I was riding a dinosaur to work. But we really need to move. We need to move. We have the technology and the ability. All we need is people that innovate and people that use that innovation. And we're willing to put money in it. I mean, I am. You know, we're doing right now some work with Chris on dent analysis. How many of us as operators, we dig dents? I dig an awful lot of dents because a tool vendor says, oh, you have a dent with possible metal loss. Well, that word possible gives Chris here the heebie-jeebie. So I have to go dig. So now we're working with Chris to develop a tool using finite element analysis so we can run all of our dents through and basically weed out the wasted money. I don't have to dig that dent. That dent is fine. The strain is fine. Let me go fix something that needs to be fixed. That's what we need, and that's what we need to invest in. New stuff, not just rely on the old stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to take the mic?
Here, I'll help. I'll help. I'll bring it back.
Can I build on what he said?
Yeah, please.
One of the things I used to teach my inspectors to do is, because I do have faith in ILI, I do have faith in hydro tests, but what really causes, what would seem to be causing accidents is what happens to the pipe in between those ILI runs? What happens to the pipe between those hydro tests? And where new technology could really help out is continual monitoring. Maybe it's under the preventive mitigative parts of the regulation, but I'm going to pick the thing that occurred off the coast of California. You know, they had run an ILI tool through there just recently. It was in great shape, but you know, they had maybe 1 or 2 ships drag anchors. I don't know what they were using as far as monitoring ship traffic over the pipeline, but maybe that's something that, you know, maybe that those offshore companies ought to like, maybe, I don't know, have a laser that goes from the platform to shore, just to make sure nobody's traversing their
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
yeah. But that's the thing is, it's the, how do you monitor change between the assessment periods?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like
Plan with it.
IMP 3.0, right?
Well, a lot of companies are doing it. Sorry, Andy. Is that a +1?
That's good. I like it.
Okay.
Hey, I have to stay employed for 20 more years as well.
Doesn't it, and one, is that what it's for?
I know we're going to pass this to you next. I promise. It's going this way. I wanted to pick up on something, you know, basically risk decisions, resource allocations based on facts and data, right? Unfortunately, sometimes it's based on emotion, which is not the right answer, but it can be based usually facts and data. And I think when I look at the landscape in front of us, you know, is it getting harder to build pipelines or easier to get pipelines? Virtually impossible to get a new pipeline permitted. Okay, is the demand for reasonable cost fuel going down or up? Up, period. No question about it. Okay, so you can't build new supply and the demand is increasing. All right, that's a problem. What is the risk tolerance of the public with regard to failures? Going up or going down? There is 0 tolerance for failures. Okay, so these assets that are on the ground are supposed to perform better and last longer and deliver more. Got that? Okay, that sounds like a winning combination. So what is the real bottom line of that is you better be razor sharp on risk assessment. There's no forgiveness for a mistake. There's no replacement opportunities, and the demand is super high. So, you know, you really got to think through what does that really mean? It means you got to be better, smarter, faster at making better decisions. We're in the process of switching over to quantitative risk assessment, moving away from deterministic and qualitative and moving to quantitative and probabilistic. And that just takes facts and data. Right now, we're running probably 2 to 3 times the number of tools we ran 5 years ago. We're probably going to run even more, which Chris likes. You know, so that's a good thing. It's facts and data. And to do the quantitative assessment, we're probably processing 10 times more data than we used to get that probabilistic certainty. So the reality is your F-18 doesn't go anywhere. It's a great thought, but if it doesn't have any fuel, it doesn't go anywhere. It's precisely worth nothing. It is a big anchor on the runway. Same with some of these risk assessment protocols. You know, if we don't have the facts and data available, you're not there. So how do you get, to Tony's point, handling that data, getting that data automated at its collection source? Those are big opportunities for our industry, I think, given the landscape that we're facing. Is how do you collect data at the source more digitally, get it into the risk assessment algorithms, process it more effectively without just horsepower in those decision protocols. And I think that is really one of the next big challenges. I mean, obviously we talk about the hardware quite a bit, you know, diagnostics, we got to have better, you know, optionality on repair mitigation strategies. But I really think when it comes down to it, making better, faster decisions is really a competitive advantage for us right now, especially in this landscape.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree, Andy. And I think that you said it far better than I did at the beginning. Looking backwards, we were in the world of data today, in the world of information, but the real future of our industry is going to be in how to make decisions faster than we've been able to make them with the reliability that you refer to. Because, you know, it is the future where we're going. You know, Chris, just picking up on your question with technology in general, you know, if we as an industry come from left to right and we look at things like assets and we generate data with various technologies that may be run through the line, above the line, however, and then with that data, we give it meaning and we call it information. And with that information, we then go make decisions. So all that incremental improvements needed. But if you came from the other side, if you started off with asking, what are the decisions that we need to make? And in order to make those decisions, what information do I need? And in order to have that information, what data do I need to collect? And what technologies do I need to collect that data if they don't exist? If you came from the right to the left, instead of always from the left to the right, you may start to think about innovative ideas that may be disruptive, that may be radical, maybe transformational. And if you think, as an example, over the decades worldwide, not just in North America, how many holes have been dug above pipelines, right or wrong? And when I think about, regardless of the repairs made in those locations where we've been digging up, if each of those points had been used retrospectively as a monitoring, a screening, some point of intelligence, whatever that may look like, how many different points of collecting data today would we have available to us? So when will we start to talk less about smart pigs and smart pipes, which is great to see you making them, but smart repairs, smart ways of using the way that we go about doing our business, thinking about decisions that we may need to make in 10 years from today or 5 years from today. Because as you said, that's not going to change, and neither is the time. Last time I looked, the sun came up and went down at the same time. We don't have any time differences, so we have to be smarter, quicker, and do more collaborative environment.
So for maybe this last series, and we'll see if anybody has any questions, we'll work that way now, is I want to just make you make a couple of statements from what we've seen and heard today, and just give us your general thoughts, if you don't mind, for each of you. So, some takeaways that I get are, IMP 1.0, I felt like back in my days at Energy Transfer was you're establishing a baseline to know what threats you have and try to keep the pipe round, sound, and in the ground, right? So we had a lot of initial assessments. What I'll call IMP 2.0 is what we now see in RIN 1, RIN 2, and RIN 3 maybe, which is more closer to, now it's about leveraging what you've learned to truly start managing the integrity of your line and the risk. But now we see things like Smartpipe, right, where we have active monitoring, right? And so whether that solves all your threats or not is not the point, right? It's that point of this evolution of it's continuous monitoring, right? So I almost want to think of that as like an IMP 3.0, right? How are we going to get there? So, what we're seeing a little bit with, a change in how we assess, maybe more towards monitoring what we see in Smartpipe. We saw Jeff Ezra talking about, digital twins, right? So it's not just your system of record, but it's also operations, right? And having a platform to integrate information to be predictive.
In high stakes poker, it's usually good to think before you act, This is definitely a high stakes game. I think you should be measuring twice, cutting once right now. And I think, innovation, a lot of people can be creative and think thoughts that others have never thought before. Some people may have that God-given talent, but it actually isn't exclusive to them. It's actually a process. And I really think if we are deliberate to slow down and take into account all the different constraints that are around us right now and I think what we'll see is a lot of opportunities actually, which is really encouraging. And I think that we will also develop a good strategy to work through those challenges. But I do think it's important right now to really pump the brakes a little bit and think about what's happening around us. And rather than trying to fight the tide, how do we work with that to embrace those challenges and actually work to solve that and create a win-win? A win and a win. And so how can we create that out of this environment that we're in? I do think that society is depending on us. They really are right now. It may not be clear to them, but I think we are a critical part of society. I think we need to step into that space and solve the challenges that are in front of us. And I think it just takes us a few minutes to think through what are all those constraints, what are all those ands, what are the things that that constrain us or challenge us, and what do we need to do?
So Hoidal?
I think that we need to figure out some faster way to separate the wheat from the chaff as far as technology. I mean, we've got to trial them faster, and if they don't work, move on. And but the key thing is, if you do trial this technology, sometimes I see companies not share their results with other companies, and there ought to be some form for sharing that information. PRC, they're great for doing that, but sometimes, maybe Boardwalk does something that would be very useful to Enbridge. It's not so. I understand there's competition from a economic standpoint, but just the benefits of coming out of that research is useful for everybody. So step up. Somebody's got to go first. You can figure out what works, what doesn't work. Don't waste your time with stuff that doesn't work, and then share your information.
Thank you.
everybody making fun of Andy because it's and Y. Look at my last name and put an S in there in my last name, and you will know why I'm in integrity. Rizk. So, you know, we need to be open-minded. We really do. We really are. We can't just do things the same way. That ship has sailed a long time ago. We're right now looking at a technology that they claim through radar, they can give us the depth of the pipeline in a river crossing. So you basically put the technology on a boat, you float over the boat with GPS coordinates, and I'll tell you how deep your pipe is and what's the cover. We're looking at a pilot to do that. We looked at a pilot program with a satellite company that can detect methane. So it flies over your pipeline. Satellites circle the Earth many times a day, and they look at your pipelines, and they can flag changes if somebody's driving on your pipeline. I have a guy that built a pool over my pipeline not too long ago. And it can flag change and alert you there's a methane leak at these GPS coordinates. 10 years ago, I didn't even dream of that. So we need to try. We need to invest. We need to make sure that we give those technologies a fair chance and see if it works or not. If it doesn't work, so be it. If it works, we're all winners. That's how we tested hotspot tools. That's how we tested EMAT and other type of tools. So, you know, the younger generation is much more open to technology than the older generation. There's no doubt about it. And, you know, my passion is making sure that we use technology to make our companies better and make us safer. And, you know, just lessons learned. Every time there's a failure in our industry, it doesn't matter if it's Andy's failure, it's our failure. Because everybody Andy liberates a pipe from the ground. I have to go and make sure that my pipe doesn't have the same problem. And, you know, and I'll pick on Andy, but Andy knows we work together every time there's an issue in any of our companies. You know, we need to strengthen that. We need to make sure that if somebody finds something, we raise our hand and tell our friends and our colleagues, we're all in this thing together, that, hey, you know, we just discovered something. You guys need to look to make sure that you have it too. So that's, you know, if we can do all these things, we'll be a much better industry going forward.
Thanks, Tony. So we're out of time, but I know it's not very often you have a chance to have the people here in the discussion. I'm sure you'll be able to catch them for a couple of minutes after, but does anybody have a burning question they'd either like to ask the panel or a specific person? Please just say your name, who you're with, and your question.
My name is Jeff Pavok. I'm with Atmospheric Climate Solutions. And my question is, what is the industry doing as far as complete system integrity? And I'm talking about from computers all the way through to the hardware. I've heard a tremendous amount about hardware today. In North Carolina, in May, we were affected. A large midstream pipeline company was shut down for about a week because of a malware attack. It had nothing to do with hardware. They got hacked. The entire system was shut down. They could not service the industry. So we had over 12,000 gas stations that ran out of gas. And so what is the industry doing, or what from the entire, I call it a system integrity,
Sure.
From the very beginning to the hardware side, what is the industry doing on things like that? Are we looking at things like that, writing technology? Because there's a tremendous amount of technology that can be implemented on that side as well to maintain the entire integrity of the system, not just the pipe.
It's a great question, and it's very timely right now. I mean, we saw what happened with Colonial this last year, and, you know, cybersecurity threats is very much a focus area unto itself. But your question is bigger than that. You know, so yes, we're working on cybersecurity threats. We've got a lot of help, obviously, as you can imagine, from DOE and others helping us figure out how to do that. A lot of energy going into cybersecurity. But really, for me, back to the F-18 with no gas. If I don't have a comprehensive system, you know, flowing how to get information, good information from the threat into the decision maker's hand into how I deploy mitigation strategies, into how I operate the pipe, we're going to have a really bumpy ride. And I think a lot of the energy right now is back to that fuel. We understand the concepts of machine learning, and we can use artificial intelligence if we can get data into the machine so that it can process it. We already understand the F-18. We already understand how artificial intelligence works. We understand how that worked with Google and everybody else. We've got them actually sitting around us right now, counseling us, and they're like, yes, and you need to get fuel in the F-18 or it doesn't go anywhere. So there's a lot of energy going in right now, pardon the pun, of catalyzing all this data or all this information into data that we can use to make decisions. And then I think integrating the bigger components that we put together, you know, how do you protect the gas control system from cyber threats? How do you protect customer demands and all the calls on the system? How do you integrate that with inline inspection tool, unscheduling? That will all happen when we get the platform stable, then I think you can integrate them. But right now, a big challenge right now is about getting that data into the machine.
Anybody? Just.
You know, the cybersecurity stuff was pretty interesting, what happened to Colonial, because you see the panic that generated. You could see the panic when my house was without power for 36 hours. You know, one of my sons, my twin sons, was much more concerned that he cannot access Facebook because the internet is down. So we need energy. But going back to cybersecurity, you know, this event has taught us a lot. We started looking at our SCADA systems, our OT network, our panels in the field, our turbines. We started looking at, you know, what is our backup plan? Because Colonial did not have a backup plan. How do I keep my pipelines, you know, running, moving, in case of a cyber threat? And where would that attack be? Would it be on SCADA? Would it be, you know, would it shut down gas control? Do I have a backup? How fast can I get my backup in? We learned a valuable lesson. My CFO had a coronary when you know, all he can see is lost revenues. So, you know, something like this that happens in our industry, if we do not learn from it, then we are doomed to fail. We really are. And that's why my last comment is whatever Andy learns, Andy shares with me, so I can make sure I don't have that trap. And you know, that's, you know, and we are spending a lot of money on cybersecurity. It's probably more than, you know, on the ledger than ILI runs right now. You know, these threats are real. And, you know, it just depends how we react to them as an industry. That's going to keep us whole.
Thank you.
The awareness, training, everything else. So what we do as a whole industry that have contingency plans to prepare for that. And that's something that I guess you think most companies don't think about that. If you're not thinking about it, you're not getting it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you.
That concludes our panel discussion. Sure. All right. Thank you. So in Chris fashion, we do have gifts. Oh boy, we have a situation. All right.
I got it.